guys, Jerome here from the Bonsai Supply, and if this is your first time coming across this channel and you like bonsai, you are in luck because this channel is all about bonsai. We learn bonsai together and we improve our skills together as well. Now if you guys are subscribed already, thank you so much for your support and welcome back. So in this week's video, I thought it would be fun if we get to know another species in detail. And so for this week's species, I chose elm because in last week's video, we did a thread grafting on a Zelkova elm, which is right here with me today. And so I thought it would be awesome to actually cover this species more in detail. Alright, so elm trees are either deciduous or semi-deciduous trees of about 40 species in the Ulmus family. And what's really cool about elms in particular is that they can grow in a very large variety of hardiness zones. So you can grow them in temperate climates but also in tropical climates. So the hardiness zones or growing zones they start at around a 3 and they go all the way to a 10. So which is amazing. So you have that huge variety of hardiness zones. But what I like about elms in particular is they are so versatile. Like you can create pretty much any style under the sun. They have really cool trunk characteristics and they vary per species. So for instance, if you look at like a Chinese elm trunk, it's completely different than from like a rough bark elm. And that's very cool. So you have a huge variety within the elm species family itself, but also they change throughout the year, throughout the seasons, which is really nice. So like in the spring, when they start to push out new leaves, some of the leaves can have like a copper color to like a light green, and then they turn to like a darker green, and then they have leaves throughout the year on the trees. And then in the fall, they usually change leaf colors. So either you can have like a yellow on it or like a dark red or orange. So that's very cool about them. And then throughout the winter time, they stay here naked, like you see these trees right here. So they lose all the leaves and then you get to appreciate the winter silhouette. And I think that is a really nice feature of elm trees. But also what I like them about as well is that they naturally have smaller leaves. And if you have like I say, an American elm that has naturally a little bit larger leaves, you can reduce those leaves very quickly. And what is also nice about elms is that they are very fast growers. So you can develop something like this into something amazing in a very short amount of time. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about is the most popular species of elm that we use for bonsai. So I would say the 3 most popular species used are American elm, Chinese elm, and then the Japanese elm, the Zelkova. Personally, I think that the Chinese elm is a fantastic starter tree. For any beginner who's looking to get into bonsai, a Chinese elm would be the best way, I think, to start. And that's because they naturally have tiny leaves, but they are also very forgiving. And like I said, you can grow them in any climate. So that's a really nice touch or a really nice feature about Chinese elms. American elms, on the other hand, are usually you find them with much larger trunks. You can find them in the United States and you can collect them in a large variety of landscapes, which is really nice, of course, because you get larger trunks. And an American elm naturally has larger leaves, but it's also much faster growing than a Chinese elm. And then you have that nice in between, which is the Japanese elm. And the Japanese elm is one of those trees that is usually utilized in the broom style form, and it can be, it's a very elegant species to work with. It can create very twiggy branches very quickly. It is a tree that is very good for ramification. Alright, so now we're going to talk about the trimming and the styling. So there are 4 main times of the year when we style and work our elm trees. So the first one would be in early spring, before the trees start to wake up. So when they're still dormant, it's a great time to get in here, wire and style the tree, and give the tree some small prunings. The second time would be still in the spring, after the first flush of growth has hardened, right? So we do small work before they wake up. And then if you want to do large trunk chops or cut off large branches, the ideal time would be in the spring after the first flush of growth has come out and has hardened. Now the third time of the year when we would work elms would be in the summer dormancy. And that's usually, depending on your climate, somewhere between June and July-ish, which is in the middle of the summer when it gets so hot outside that the deciduous trees take a little break. So they go to sleep, they don't continue to push out more growth, and it's very noticeable. And that's a good time to go in here, defoliate the elms, so remove all of the leaves, and then give them another wiring, give them another styling if you have to, or if that's the first time you style your tree. That's also another good time to make large cuts. And now the final time to work on elms in the year would be in the fall. So once the elms have lost their leaves in the fall, that's another good time to make medium-sized cuts, wire your tree, and style it once again. Now those are the 4 main times throughout the year where we really hands-on touch the trees. Now in regards to trimming your elms, you can really do it at any time of the year, right? Especially when the canopies start to overgrow, you can trim them back at any time. What I was talking about was 4 major stylings throughout the year. Now when you style your elm tree, as you can see here, you can really apply a variety of styles. So you do not be limited with elm styles. You can literally apply any style, from cascading to informal upright to windswept to weeping to root over rock. So that's something that's really cool about elms, that you can really apply any style to them that you want. So next up, I wanted to talk about the repotting, which is very important, but it's very, very simple, and the same applies to all elms in all climates and to all species. So all elms are being repotted in the spring at bud break. So as you see, these guys right here don't have any leaves on them, but as soon as I see the buds starting to swell on the tips, that's when it is time to go ahead and repot these guys. Now when you repot the elms in the spring, it is really important to note that after you repot them, you want to make sure that they don't dip below freezing anymore. So once I see that they start to wake up, I go ahead and repot them, and then I move them into my greenhouse where it stays above 40 degrees Fahrenheit. So once the temperatures are steadily above 40 degrees Fahrenheit at night, I go ahead and move my trees outside. So next we're going to talk about the placement of elm trees. Let's start with the spring. So in the spring, I like to move all of my elm trees in full sun. Now once early to mid-summer hits, and if I do see some burnt leaves on the canopy, I see some shriveled leaves from the heat, then I would move my elms into the afternoon shade and like change the placement where they get morning sun but then afternoon shade. Now in the fall, I would move them back out into full sun, but then in the winter time, and if you live in a tropical climate, this does not apply to you, but if you live in a temperate climate, I would move my elm trees after they have lost their leaves, set them on the ground, away from any wind, and cover the pots with some sort of insulating material such as like pine bark mulch or leaves or anything like that. And just keep them on the ground or inside of a greenhouse. That's how you would want to overwinter them, and as well in terms of place. Now when I talk about the placement of your trees, you don't necessarily have to move your trees around. A lot of times as the sun moves throughout the year, you naturally get these like afternoon shades in a section, for instance, and that's where I will keep my elm trees. So you kind of want to set up your backyard or your display where you don't constantly have to move your trees every day into the afternoon shade. I usually, like throughout the year, I pay attention how the sun moves throughout the backyard, and if I see a spot where that's like that gets filtered light or shade in the afternoon in the summertime, that's why I would move my elm. Because usually in the fall, when the sun moves again, I would usually get sun again throughout the year. So that's something to keep in mind, that you do not have to move your trees constantly. Or if you don't have any trees in your backyard, you could always put some shade cloth up during the hot summer months, and then the problem is fixed as well. So next I want to talk about care and maintenance, and we're going to cover things such as watering, fertilizing, but also pests and diseases. So starting out with the watering, it's very simple, don't overthink it. When elms actively grow, they need a lot of water, and if they don't actively grow, they need a lot less water. And that's very simple. So throughout the growing season, so in the spring when they start to wake up and start to grow, that's when I want to make sure that I water them every single morning and make sure that the soil never fully dries out. In the late fall and during the winter time, I want to make sure that my soil is just very slightly moist on the verge of drying out. So during the winter time, I actually never water my trees because I keep them outside, like I said before, on the ground and cover the pots with leaves. And during the winter time, it rains at least once a week, and all of my trees, I just check them. But since it rains once a week, I technically actually never have to water my trees throughout the winter, which is really nice. So I can actually go ahead and vacation. So next, when we talk about fertilizing, I like to approach elms in two different ways in terms of fertilizing. So I use our all-purpose slow-release bonsai fertilizer, which is an 18-4-10, and I use that on trees that need a lot of growing. So like these two trees, right, they're in their early stages. They need to have a lot more growing to do. So on these two trees, I would use the all-purpose fertilizer, 18-4-10, high nitrogen. I want to get a lot of growth out of them throughout the year. I want to really take advantage of that. But once they get really old and refined, like these trees that I'm showing here right now, that's when I would want to switch to our organic fertilizer, which is more for a maintained fertilizer, and it doesn't push as aggressive as like the quick release fertilizer. So the organic fertilizer is an 835, that's going to come out in spring. So any minute now it's going to hit the market, and of course we're going to let you know. That's what I would use on an older tree just to kind of slow the growth down. And so that's how I go about training trees such as elms. Now, last but not least, let's talk about the pest and the diseases. So elms have a few things that attack them in terms of pests. So the Dutch elm disease affects mainly American elms, but also European elms. And the Dutch elm disease is a transmitted microfungus by a beetle. And so you can prevent that by spraying your trees on a monthly basis. But I'm going to get to that in just a second. The next really big pest is the elm leaf beetle, which if your tree all of a sudden defoliates throughout the year, loses all of its leaves, that's usually due to the elm leaf beetle. Now, the last thing that they are prone to is root rot. So that's why when you grow elms of any kind, you want to make sure that you use free draining bonsai soil, such as the one that we use, which is our all-purpose bonsai soil mixture. Now, in terms of the Dutch elm disease, if you don't have a European or American elm, that does not really apply to you. But if you do, what I would suggest for Dutch elm disease, but any other beetle that would attack your tree, I just spray my trees on a monthly basis. And I use a chemical spray that specifically, attacks beetles of all sorts. And so the spray that I like to use is called Tall Star. And I just spray all of my trees. I spray the soil, I spray the leaves, I spray everything once a month. Now, if I do see some beetle activity, like a lot of time, if you spray your tree, you would find sometimes you find a few dead beetles on the soil the next morning. And if that's the case, then I want to go ahead and spray maybe for the next 2 months, every 2 weeks, my trees, just to prevent them from actually getting to the trees. But other than that, I spray once a month as long as they have leaves on them. And that's just to help prevent any sort of beetle attack or any other insect attack as well. So this is it for today. If you guys have any questions on elms or have any comments, or maybe I forgot to mention something, please comment down below in the comment section. Or if there's any species that you would like me to cover in the next upcoming videos, please let me know as well, of course. And thank you guys so much for watching. Please make sure that you like this video, subscribe to our channel so that you are always updated and are always notified when our new videos come out, and I will catch you guys next time.